At the grand launch event of my husband's company, I had planned to reveal that I was the heiress to a multi-billion-dollar fortune and announce our relationship to the world. But as I walked in, I heard him tell his coworker, "She's so naive, she has no idea what's really going on." That was when I saw them tangled on the office couch. She's so naive. She has no idea what's really going on. Adrian's voice filtered through the crack of his office door, stopping me dead in my tracks in the hallway of Brooks Technologies. I had come to surprise him before the launch event, wearing the emerald dress he had bought me for our anniversary, gripping the note cards where I had written my grand reveal, that I wasn't just his supportive wife, but the heiress to Sinclair Pharmaceuticals, the one who had been secretly funding his dreams. Lauren Jenkins's laugh followed, deep and intimate. "How much longer do you plan to keep playing house with her?" Through the narrow opening, I saw them on his leather couch, the same one I had helped him pick out last spring. Her perfectly manicured fingers traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. They were both fully dressed, but in a posture that suggested this wasn't their first stolen moment. My knees weakened. I pressed myself against the wall, grateful for its cold support on my back. The speech cards crumpled in my hand as my fist clenched involuntarily. 6 years. 6 years pretending to be an ordinary woman, hiding my inheritance to make sure his love was real. And this was my reward. "Only until after tonight's launch," Adrian said, sliding his hand down Lauren's back. "Once the funding is secured, I can start the separation process. The prenuptial agreement I had her sign protects everything I've built." Everything he had built with my money, with the anonymous investments I had funneled through shell companies to save his failing startup 3 years ago, then 2 years ago, and again last spring when he almost drove the company into bankruptcy through poor management. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. "What about her family?" Lauren asked. "Doesn't she come from old money or something?" Adrian laughed, and the sound turned my stomach. "Her grandmother left her some jewelry she keeps hidden in the kitchen drawer. She thinks I don't know. It's probably worth a few $1,000s. She pretends to be a simple freelance designer, but I've seen how she looks at expensive things. Classic champagne taste on a beer budget. That's why I had to protect my assets with the prenup. The kitchen drawer, where I kept my Cartier watch, my Van Cleef and Arpels earrings, my father's Patek Philippe items worth more than the quarterly revenue of his entire company, hidden among mismatched spoons and expired coupons. Because I wanted him to love me for me, not for the billions of the Sinclair fortune that had sat untouched since my father died 2 years ago. "You're terrible," Lauren said, but her tone suggested she found it charming. "What time are we meeting at the launch?" "At 7:30, I will introduce you to the board as our new Director of Research and Development." The position I told Alara was going to Mark from the Boston office. My hand found the wall again, needing its stability. Mark didn't exist. I had thought that name was strange when Adrian mentioned it last week. I had even offered to help prepare his welcome package. Adrian had brushed me off, saying human resources would handle everything. "And your wife won't suspect a thing?" "Ilara," he said my name as if it were something distasteful. "She'll be too busy playing the supportive wife. She loves that, standing by my side, smiling for the cameras, pretending she understands what we do here. I bought her that green dress specifically for tonight. She'll wear it because she always does what I expect." The green dress hanging in our closet. The one he had surprised me with last month, saying it matched my eyes. I had felt so touched by the gesture that he remembered our anniversary when he had been so absorbed in work lately. Now I understood it was just another prop in his performance. My phone vibrated in my purse. A text from Emily, my only friend who knew the truth about my inheritance. "Are you really going to tell him tonight? Please reconsider. Something doesn't add up about all this." If she only knew how right her instincts were. I heard movement inside the office. Chairs scraping against the floor. They were getting up. I forced myself to walk, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I headed for the stairs. No elevators, too much of a chance of running into them when the doors opened. 20 minutes earlier, I had been rehearsing my speech in the car. "Adrian, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not who you think I am." I am actually Alara Sinclair, and I've been supporting your dreams because I believe in you, because I love you. I had imagined his face, the surprise transforming into joy as he realized we could build an empire together. Now those words tasted like poison in my throat. The stairwell door clicked decisively shut behind me, and I stood there under the fluorescent light, my designer shoes, which I had told Adrian were knockoffs, already pinching my feet. My phone rang. Adrian's picture flashed on the screen, a photo from our wedding day where he was looking at me like I was his entire world. "Hey, beautiful," he said when I answered, his voice warm and affectionate. "Just wanted to make sure you're still coming tonight. You're wearing the green dress, right?" "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Perfect. I have a huge surprise planned for after the announcement. Something that's going to change our lives forever." "I can't wait to see it," I replied. And for once, I meant it. Just not in the way he expected. "I have to go," he continued. "Still in meetings. These investors are very demanding, but after tonight, everything will be different, I promise." "Yes, Adrian, everything will be different." The call from Arthur Sterling came 3 days later while I was pretending to work on a logo design for a fictitious client. My laptop screen showed Adobe Illustrator, but my mind kept replaying Adrian's words, Lauren's laugh, the cruelty of their conversation. When Arthur's name popped up on my phone, I almost didn't answer. The lawyers for the Sinclair estate only called when something was wrong. "Alara, we need you here immediately," Arthur said, skipping any preamble. His voice carried the weight of 40 years in estate law. "There are documents requiring your signature before closing today, or we face a 7-figure tax penalty on your father's pharmaceutical patents." I checked the clock. 2 p.m. Adrian wouldn't be home until midnight as usual, but I would still need an excuse to leave. "How long will it take?" 2 hours minimum. These are complex transfers involving the European holdings. If we don't file this before the end of the month, the IRS will assume you are rejecting portions of the inheritance. My inheritance. The $3 billion that Adrian thought were a few of Grandma's jewels. The pharmaceutical empire he had no idea was funding his dreams through carefully orchestrated anonymous investments. Every time Brooks Technologies was on the verge of bankruptcy, a mysterious venture capitalist appeared with the exact amount to keep them afloat. Adrian never questioned the coincidence. His ego wouldn't allow him to consider that someone was protecting him. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, I told Arthur, already fabricating the lie I would tell Adrian if he asked. An urgent job for a demanding client. Another logo revision. The mundane fiction of my made-up career. The Sterling and Associates law firm occupied 3 floors of a building that screamed old money. Persian rugs that cost more than most people's cars. Original paintings that belonged in museums. Arthur received me in his office. The documents were already spread out on his mahogany desk. Every signature I put down released another portion of my father's empire into my control. Pharmaceutical facilities in Switzerland, research patents valued in the billions, investment portfolios that had been growing since before I was born. "Your father would be proud," Arthur said as I signed for the 20th time. "He always said you'd know when to claim your legacy." Proud, however, watching me hide my wealth from my husband like a shameful secret, pretending to be ordinary while Adrian built his ego on the foundations of my hidden support. 2 hours later, I was walking through the lobby of Brooks Technologies, having decided to surprise Adrian with a coffee from his favorite cafe when I bumped into Lauren Jenkins. It wasn't accidental. She had clearly been waiting, perfectly positioned to intercept anyone heading to the elevators. "Alara," she said my name as if we were old friends, even though I knew we had never formally been introduced. Her hand gripped my arm, her fingers pressing just hard enough to keep me from pulling away. "So great to run into you." Up close, she was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, blonde where I was brunette, confident like women who have never doubted their place in the world. Her perfume hit me immediately, something expensive and distinctive. Tom Ford Black Orchid voice. The same scent that had clung to Adrian's jacket last week when he claimed to have been in back-to-back meetings. "I don't believe we've met," I said, though of course, I knew exactly who she was. Lauren Jenkins, Director of Research and Development, the woman whose fingers had been tracing patterns on my husband's chest 3 days ago. Oh, but I feel like I know you, she said, her smile showing too many teeth. Adrian talks about you constantly. How devoted you are, how much you support him. She paused, her eyes scanning my outfit, the deliberately modest Zara dress, the knockoff designer bag I carried to maintain my cover. It must be so hard having a husband who works such long hours. The sympathy in her voice was so fake it could have been manufactured in a lab. She squeezed my arm again, and I caught another waft of that perfume. Definitely black orchid. Definitely the exact scent that had been on Adrian's clothes. He's a very dedicated man to his work, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Oh, yes. Very dedicated. Something flashed in her eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or triumph. We were in a meeting until 3 a.m., strategic planning for the launch. Your husband has incredible stamina. The coffee in my hand suddenly felt heavy. 3 a.m. He had texted me at 11 saying he was heading home. Another lie to add to the collection I was gathering. I have to go, I said, taking a step toward the elevator. Of course. She let go of my arm but leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. By the way, that's a beautiful dress. Zara has some really cute things lately. She walked away before I could respond, her heels echoing on the marble with the confidence of someone who had already won a game I didn't know we were playing. I stood there holding the cooling coffee, wondering how she knew where I shopped. Had Adrian told her? Had he laughed at his wife's bargain hunting while they carried out their strategic planning sessions? The surprise got worse that night. Adrian's mother, Eleanor, arrived unannounced at 7, using the spare key we had foolishly given her for emergencies. I was setting the table with my grandmother's Wedgwood china, a set valued at $30,000 that I had told Adrian I found at a flea market for $200. Alara, dear, Eleanor said, though her tone suggested I was anything but. She air-kissed my cheeks while her eyes catalogued everything wrong with our penthouse. I was just in the neighborhood. She lived on the Upper East Side. Nothing in Manhattan was her neighborhood. Adrian isn't home yet, I said, though she knew that. She never visited when her son was around to buffer her criticisms. Perfect, we can have some girl talk. She settled into our living room like a queen granting an audience. This place looks quite dated, doesn't it? Maybe after the launch, you guys will be able to afford to redecorate. The penthouse was immaculate. I had spent a fortune making it look comfortably middle class, hiding anything that might reveal my wealth. But for Eleanor, who knew nothing of my inheritance, we simply weren't good enough. We're comfortable, I said, pouring her wine from a bottle I claimed was from Trader Joe's, but which had actually cost $300. Comfortable. She repeated the word like it tasted bad. Well, I suppose that's something. Though at your age, I had already given Charles 3 children. Adrian isn't getting any younger, you know. We had the children conversation every time she visited. What she didn't know was that Adrian had been putting off that discussion for 2 years, always claiming we needed to be more financially stable first. Now, I wondered if he had just been waiting until he could leave me for Lauren. Speaking of suitable marriages, Eleanor continued, swirling her wine, I ran into Lauren Jenkins at the club yesterday. Such a good pedigree. Her father is in pharmaceuticals, you know, old money. The kind of background that would perfectly complement Adrian's ambitions. The wine glass trembled in my hand. She seems nice. Nice. Eleanor laughed. Dear, she's exceptional. Harvard Medical School, published researcher. The kind of woman who understands Adrian's work. Her eyes locked onto me with surgical precision. Not that you don't try, sweetheart, but some things require a certain level of sophistication. I served dinner on my grandmother's china while Eleanor continued her monologue about the virtues of Lauren Jenkins. Every plate I set on the table was worth more than Eleanor's monthly mortgage, but she only saw what I wanted her to see. Mismatched plates of a middle-class wife playing house in a world she didn't belong to. After she left, I was cleaning the kitchen when I found it. Adrian's gym bag, forgotten in a corner behind the recycling. Inside, buried under his workout clothes, was a receipt that made my heart stop. The Ritz-Carlton, Boston. 2 nights, King Suite. The dates matched the weekend he had claimed to be working around the clock in the lab. Room service charges for breakfast for 2. Champagne served at midnight. When Adrian finally got home at 11:30, I was still holding the receipt. "How was Boston?" I asked. He didn't even pause as he hung up his coat. "What do you mean?" "I haven't been to Boston in months." I stood there holding the receipt while Adrian hung up his coat. His lie about Boston suspended in the air between us like a physical presence. My hands were no longer shaking. They had moved past that into a strange numbness that spread through my arms and chest. He walked past me toward the bedroom, loosening his tie, completely unaware that I was holding the proof of his deception in my hands. The next morning, I called in sick to my fictitious freelance projects and did something I had never done before. I followed my husband. He left at 8:30. Normal time, normal routine. He kissed my cheek with lips that had probably kissed Lauren in that Boston hotel room. He told me not to wait up because Tuesday meetings always ran late. Tuesday. I made a mental note. At noon, I positioned myself in a coffee shop across from Le Bernardin, the luxury restaurant where Adrian claimed he could never get a reservation. Through the window, I saw him arrive first, checking his watch, fixing his hair. He had changed his shirt since that morning, the blue one I had bought him for Christmas, replaced by the gray one Lauren had complimented at the company dinner last month. She arrived 10 minutes later, and the way his face lit up squeezed my chest. He stood to greet her, his hand lingering on her lower back as he guided her to their table, a corner booth, intimate and partially hidden from view. The waiter brought champagne without them having to ask. It was clearly their usual spot, their usual Tuesday routine. Her hand reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his as they looked at menus they probably knew by heart. She threw her head back, laughing at something he said, and he watched her with an expression I recognized. The same way he used to look at me when we were dating, when I was still mysterious and exciting, before I became a piece of furniture in his carefully constructed life. When they left at 2:30, Adrian helped her put on her coat with such tenderness that I had to look away. His hands lingered on her shoulders, adjusting the collar, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The same gestures he had once reserved for me, now performed on a sidewalk in broad daylight where anyone could see. Where his wife could see. I drove to Emily's apartment instead of going home. One look at my face was all it took for her to pull me inside, already reaching for the wine. We sat on her couch, the same one where she had helped me rehearse my big reveal speech just 2 weeks ago, when I thought my biggest problem was finding the perfect moment for the announcement. "I have to tell you something," Emily said suddenly, wringing her hands in her lap. "I've been trying to find a way to tell you for weeks." The wine in my glass sloshed dangerously as I set it down. "What?" 3 weeks ago, I was downtown looking for a birthday present for my mom. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I walked past Cartier, and through the window, I saw Adrian. He was with a blonde woman. She was trying on rings. Ilara. Engagement rings. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the throw pillow to steady myself. "Lauren. Do you know her?" "She works at Brooks Technologies. She's the director of R&D. The words came out mechanical, as if I were reading from a company directory. Harvard Medical School. Old money. Good pedigree, according to Adrian's mother. Emily grabbed my hands. Hers were shaking. He was buying her a ring, Ilara. The saleswoman was bringing out different settings. She was posing with each one, taking selfies. They looked so happy. I wanted to march in there and scream at him, but I just froze. I've been carrying this guilt for 3 weeks. I'm so sorry I didn't say anything. An engagement ring. While he was still married to me. While he still came home to our bed, ate the dinners I cooked, played the devoted husband at company events. The audacity of it left me breathless. "When did you say this was?" I asked, my mind running through dates. 3 Tuesdays ago, around 2 p.m. Tuesday. His usual day. Lunch at Le Bernardin, followed by ring shopping. How romantic, how perfectly planned. I wondered if he had already proposed, if she wore the ring somewhere I couldn't see it, or if he was waiting until after the launch. After he secured his funding and could dump me without risking his company. That night, I waited until Adrian was deeply asleep, his breathing even and heavy. His phone was charging on his nightstand, but I didn't need it. I had something better. Access to our joint accounts. The ones he didn't know I monitored through my own banking app. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, screen brightness turned all the way down, and started digging. There they were. Small transfers every week. $500 here, $700 there, always to the same routing number I didn't recognize. The transfers had been happening for over a year, labeled as investment planning or portfolio diversification. $50,000 systematically siphoned from our joint savings. But I knew these patterns. I had managed hundreds of millions in Sinclair funds. I had seen every financial maneuver possible. This wasn't investment planning, this was an exit strategy. He was building a cushion, probably in an account solely in his name, preparing for the divorce he thought was coming after the launch. The irony almost made me laugh. He was stealing what he thought was his own money, completely unaware that every cent in our accounts came from my inheritance, carefully laundered through fake freelance projects and imaginary clients. He was embezzling from the Sinclair empire without even knowing it existed. At 3 a.m., a phone vibrated. Not his usual cell phone, but a sound coming from his jacket pocket. A second phone. Like a character in a bad spy movie. He got out of bed, grabbed the jacket, and locked himself in the bathroom. But our penthouse had thin walls, and I had learned years ago that if you pressed your ear to the wall, you could hear everything. "The timeline is tight," he whispered. "The launch is Thursday. I need 2 more days to get everything in place." A pause while someone responded. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. Alora is way too trusting. She actually bought the story about Mark from the Boston office." A soft chuckle. "I know. She even offered to help with his welcome package. Sometimes I almost feel guilty about how easy this is." Another pause. "The divorce papers are already drafted. My lawyer says with the prenup, she won't get anything except what she brought into the marriage, which is basically some old jewelry and whatever she's saved from her little design projects." My little design projects that had funneled $3 million into Brooks Technologies over the last 6 years. After the launch, after the investors sign, I'll tell her. Friday morning. I want to do it in person. At least give her that respect. Respect. The word made me nauseous. "I love you too," he whispered. And my heart finally broke completely. Just 2 more days and we can stop hiding. The bathroom door unlocked. I forced my breathing to remain deep and steady as he slid back into bed. He lay next to me, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and within minutes, he was asleep again. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mapping out my own timeline. The launch on Thursday was 36 hours away. Adrian thought he had 2 more days of pretending. He was wrong. The 36 hours passed with an agonizing slowness. I moved through Wednesday like an actress who had forgotten her lines but kept performing anyway. Adrian left that morning with his usual kiss on the cheek, reminding me of the launch event, making sure I would wear the green dress. I smiled and nodded, playing the devoted wife one last time while my insides twisted with the knowledge of what was to come. Thursday arrived heavy with a humidity that made the air thick and suffocating. I spent the afternoon in Arthur Sterling's office, signing documents that would freeze certain anonymous investments, particularly the ones flowing into Brooks Technologies. Arthur didn't question my sudden decisions. He had been my father's lawyer for 30 years and understood that sometimes timing is everything, in business as well as in personal matters. At 6, I stood before our bedroom mirror, zipping up the emerald dress Adrian had picked out for me. The fabric felt like armor against my skin. My hands were perfectly steady as I applied my lipstick a shade darker than I usually wore. In my purse, the speech cards I had written weeks ago sat next to new ones I had drafted that morning. 2 versions of the same reveal, but with very different endings. The drive to Brooks Technologies took 20 minutes through New York City traffic. I used the time to breathe, to center myself, to transform from the woman who had spent 6 years hiding her true self into someone who was about to reveal everything. The glass facade of the building reflected the setting sun, tinting everything a golden hue that somehow felt sinister. I parked in the visitor section, not my usual spot next to Adrian's BMW. Tonight, I wasn't really his wife. I was something entirely different. The elevator ride to the 40th floor had never felt so long. With every floor that passed, it felt as though I was shedding another layer of the character I had played for so long. The freelance designer, the supportive wife, the naive woman who didn't understand her husband's business. By the time the doors opened, I felt raw, exposed, and powerful in a way I had never experienced before. The executive floor was buzzing with pre-event energy. Waiters were arranging elaborate displays, while bartenders polished glasses that would soon hold champagne, costing more per bottle than most people's monthly car payments. But I wasn't heading to the main ballroom just yet. I had one more thing to confirm, one more piece of evidence to gather before I could move forward with what I was planning. The door to Adrian's office was slightly ajar, golden light spilling into the hallway. I approached silently, my heels quiet on the thick carpet. Through the crack, I heard his voice, casual and dismissive, in a tone I now recognized all too well. "She'll be here soon," he was saying. Playing the perfect wife in that green dress I bought her. God, she was so grateful for that thing. You'd think I had bought her diamonds instead of something on sale from Zara. Lauren's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. Does she really have no idea about us? Alara is sweet, but observation isn't her strong suit. She still thinks I'm working late when I'm with you. Still thinks that conference in Boston was real. I could probably move you into our penthouse and she'd think you were the new maid. They were sitting on the leather couch, the same one from the other day. Lauren had taken off her shoes, her feet tucked beneath her as she leaned against Adrian's shoulder. On her left hand, catching the light from his desk lamp, was a ring. The engagement ring Emily had seen him buy. She was already wearing it, just on the wrong hand for now. After the divorce conversation tomorrow, we won't have to hide anymore, Adrian continued, his fingers playing with her hair. I have everything set up. The prenuptial agreement protects all my assets. She'll walk away with what she brought in, which is basically nothing. Some jewelry from her grandmother she thinks I don't know about, maybe $50,000 she's saved up from her design gigs. And the company? Lauren asked. Once tonight's launch is a success and the investors sign, Brooks Technologies will be valued at over $100 million, which she can't touch a dime of, thanks to that agreement. She was so eager to prove she wasn't after my money that she signed it without even having a lawyer look at it. The irony of that statement almost made me laugh out loud. The prenuptial agreement protected his assets, yes, but it also protected mine. Every anonymous investment, every shell company transfer, every cent of the Sinclair fortune remained solely under my control. He had been so focused on protecting himself from a gold digger that he never considered he might be the one getting taken to the cleaners. I backed away from the door and walked to the executive floor restroom, the one with marble counters and individual stalls that locked properly. I stood in front of the sink, meeting my own eyes in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who had rehearsed speeches about love and partnership. This woman had sharper edges, clearer vision, and a plan that was about to unfold. I called Arthur from the bathroom, keeping my voice low but firm. Execute the transfers we discussed, all of them. Immediately. Are you sure? Once I do this, it cannot be reversed. I'm sure. Next, I called the security firm I had contacted earlier that week. Mercury Security. This is Alara Sinclair. I need your team at Brooks Technologies in 1 hour. Discreet positioning, but highly visible when I give the signal. Understood, Miss Sinclair. We'll have 6 operatives in place. I touched up my lipstick, adjusted the emerald dress one last time, and walked toward the ballroom. The transformation was complete. I wasn't walking in as Adrian's naive wife. I was walking in as Alara Sinclair, heiress to a pharmaceutical empire, about to reclaim my power in the most public way possible. The ballroom doors were wide open, revealing a sea of New York's tech elite mixed with the city's old money. Investors, board members, journalists, and influencers all here to celebrate the triumph of Brooks Technologies. Heads turned as I walked in, many recognizing me as Adrian's wife, offering warm smiles and congratulations. Richard Klein, a board member, approached immediately with his wife Margaret at his side. "Allura, you must be so proud," Richard said, shaking my hand. "Adrian has built something remarkable." "Yes," I nodded, my smile perfectly calibrated. "Tonight is certainly going to be a remarkable night." Margaret leaned in conspiratorially. "He's lucky to have such a supportive partner behind every great man, right?" "Sometimes," I replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "The woman isn't behind him at all. Sometimes she's been standing in front the entire time, and he just hasn't noticed." They laughed, taking it as a joke. If they only knew how literal I was being. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and praise for Adrian's success. Every compliment added fuel to the fire burning in my chest. Several people mentioned how lucky Adrian was to have me, how my support must have meant everything during the difficult early years. "More than you know," I told each of them, smiling wider with every passing minute. The champagne glass felt weightless in my hand as I watched the crowd mingle and swirl through the room like schools of expensive fish. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the New York City skyline sparkled below us, unaware that 40 floors up, a marriage and a company were about to implode in front of 300 witnesses. The lights dimmed slightly, and Adrian stepped up to the podium, his confidence radiating across the room. He looked every bit the successful CEO in his tailored Tom Ford suit, the one I had bought him last year with Sinclair money he didn't know existed. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Brooks Tech logo, sleek and modern, built entirely on lies and anonymous investments from a wife he thought was a nobody. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice carrying that practiced warmth he deployed at investor meetings. "Tonight marks the culmination of 6 years of innovation, dedication, and cutting-edge science. Brooks Technologies is poised to revolutionize gene therapy, and we couldn't have done it without every single one of you." The crowd applauded politely. I noticed Lauren positioning herself near the stage, close enough to be seen but not so close as to seem presumptuous. She had changed since that afternoon. Now she wore a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than she allegedly made in a month. The engagement ring had vanished from her right hand, likely tucked away in her purse until the appropriate time. Adrian continued his speech, outlining projections and market opportunities, using words like synergy and paradigm shift that made investors reach for their checkbooks. He was good at this, I had to admit. The performance, the commanding presence, the ability to make people believe in his vision. He just hadn't realized that his entire vision had been funded by the woman he had called naive 4 hours ago. Before we move on to the technical presentation, Adrian said, his smile widening, "I want to take a moment to thank someone very special. My wife, Allura, who has been my rock throughout this journey. Honey, could you come up here?" The crowd turned toward me, applauding warmly. This wasn't part of the script, at least, not the one I had prepared. But Adrian loved his grand gestures, his public displays that made him look like the devoted husband. I set down my champagne and walked toward the stage, my heels echoing on the marble floor with metronomic precision. Every step felt like walking toward my own execution and resurrection simultaneously. Adrian held out his hand to help me up the 3 steps to the stage. His palm was dry and warm, the hand of someone entirely sure of his control over the situation. He pulled me close, kissing my cheek for the cameras that were already flashing. "Isn't she wonderful?" he said into the microphone, his arm wrapped possessively around my waist. 6 years of supporting my dream, never complaining about the late nights or endless meetings. I literally couldn't have done this without her. The irony of that statement almost made me laugh. He quite literally couldn't have done it without me, just not in the way he was implying. The crowd applauded again, and I saw several board members' wives dabbing their eyes, moved by this display of marital devotion. Actually, I said, my voice ringing through the room before Adrian could continue. I have something I'd like to share, too. Adrian's arm tightened around my waist, but his smile never faltered. Of course, sweetheart, he said, though I caught the flash of annoyance in his eyes. This wasn't planned. I wasn't supposed to speak. I gently freed myself from his grip and took the microphone. Its weight felt right in my hands, like a weapon I had been waiting to wield. The room fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward the stage, expectant and curious. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. This is indeed a momentous occasion, and I am honored to be a part of it. Adrian is right that I've been supporting his dream for 6 years. What he doesn't know is exactly how much support I've been providing. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Adrian's hand touched my elbow, a warning disguised as affection. You see, I continued, stepping out of his reach, Adrian has had an anonymous investor for the last 6 years. Someone who believed in his vision enough to pump in millions when the banks wouldn't lend him a dime. Someone who saved Brooks Technologies from bankruptcy not once, not twice, but 3 times. The confusion in the room shifted to keen interest. Phones appeared in hands, sensing that something newsworthy was happening. Adrian's face had gone very still. The kind of stillness that precedes fight or flight. That investor, I said, looking directly at Adrian now, was me. Alara Sinclair, sole heiress to Sinclair Pharmaceuticals. And the woman you called naive this afternoon while you were wrapped around Lauren Jenkins on your office couch. The gasp that swept through the room was almost physical, as if all 300 people had inhaled simultaneously. Adrian's mouth opened, closed, and opened again, like a fish suddenly pulled from the water. His hand shot out to grab the microphone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of his reach. That's ridiculous, he managed to say, his voice audible even without amplification. Alara, what are you doing? I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the presentation system with a single tap. Arthur Sterling had set up this technical capability yesterday, ensuring I could display whatever I needed on the massive screen. Behind us, the first document appeared. Bank records showing wire transfers from Sinclair Holdings to Brooks Technologies, fully dated and documented. Millions of dollars flowing from my inheritance into Adrian's company. Every major funding round, I said, my voice growing stronger with every word, every emergency capital injection, every bridge loan that kept this company alive came from Sinclair money. My money. The money Adrian didn't know I had because I wanted to be sure he loved me for me, not my inheritance. The screen shifted to show a photo Arthur had provided. My father and I at a Sinclair board meeting 5 years ago, clearly identifying me as his daughter and heiress. Then another document. The shell company paperwork showing exactly how the investments had been structured to remain anonymous. Lauren had started inching toward the exit, but the Mercury security staff was already in position. Their presence subtle, but effective. She stopped, trapped between the crowd and the security team, her face pale under the ballroom lights. But that's not even the best part, I continued, feeling the sheer power of the moment coursing through me. This afternoon, while getting ready for tonight's event, I discovered some interesting financial irregularities. It seems someone has been moving money from Brooks Tech's operating accounts into his personal accounts. Someone has been expensing personal costs as company charges. Someone has been committing what I believe the FBI and SEC would call embezzlement and wire fraud. The screen filled with the evidence I had gathered over the last 3 days. The falsified invoices, the suspicious transfers, the Boston hotel bill charged to the company as a conference expense when no such conference existed. Adrian's face had gone from pale to gray. His hands gripped the podium as if it could keep him from drowning. Security? Someone yelled from the crowd. Someone get security. But the security team was mine, and they didn't move except to keep the exits controlled. The crowd had become a living organism. Phones were held high, recording everything. The silence was replaced by urgent whispers and the rapid-fire clicking of photos being taken. "I have already forwarded this information to the proper federal authorities," I announced, looking directly out at the crowd of investors and board members. "I imagine they'll have some questions about where your money really went." The elevator descended in silence while behind me, the ballroom erupted into total chaos. Through the closing doors, I caught a glimpse of board members swarming Adrian, their faces contorted with rage, while reporters shoved their way through with microphones and cameras. Mercury Security held their positions, maintaining order but doing nothing to protect Adrian from the consequences that were finally catching up to him. My phone started buzzing before I even reached the parking garage. Adrian's name flashed on the screen, call after call, all of which I let go to voicemail. Then came the rapid, increasingly desperate text messages. "What have you done? We need to talk. This is insane. Do you understand what you just destroyed? Pick up the phone right now." I put the device on silent and dropped it into my purse as I walked to my car. The valet, a young guy who had always been nice to me, handed me my keys with wide eyes. He had clearly heard what went down upstairs. News traveled fast in buildings like this, especially when it involved public humiliation and federal crimes. The drive to our penthouse took 15 minutes through unusually light traffic. I used the time to call Arthur Sterling, who picked up on the first ring despite it being nearly 10 p.m. "I watched the live stream," he said without preamble. Several reporters were broadcasting. "You handled that remarkably well." "I need the divorce papers filed first thing in the morning," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And I need you to freeze all joint assets immediately." Already in motion. I took the liberty of prepping everything after our meeting yesterday. That prenuptial agreement Adrian insisted upon is actually quite favorable to you, as it strictly protects all premarital assets and inheritances. He essentially signed himself out of the Sinclair fortune without ever knowing it existed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adrian had been so worried about protecting his future earnings from a gold-digging wife that he had legally forfeited any claim to my billions. His lawyer had probably congratulated him on his foresight. I arrived at the penthouse to find the locks already changed. Building management moved fast when Arthur Sterling called. My new keys worked perfectly, and I stepped into what had been our home, though it now felt like a crime scene I needed to process and evacuate. My phone continued its relentless buzzing. Adrian's texts had evolved from rage to bargaining. "We can fix this. Think about what you're throwing away." 6 years, Alara. She meant nothing. "I made mistakes, but we can fix it. Please just talk to me." I moved through the apartment methodically, taking only what had been mine before Adrian walked into my life. My grandmother's Wedgwood china, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, the childhood photo albums I had hidden in the back of the closet, the jewelry I had kept concealed in the kitchen drawer, including the Cartier watch and the Van Cleef pieces worth more than Adrian's car. Everything else, the furniture we had picked out together, the art we bought on our honeymoon, the expensive gifts he had given me over the years I left behind. They were props from a performance I was no longer a part of. Emily arrived at midnight with boxes and fierce loyalty. One look at my face was all she needed to pull me into a hug that nearly shattered my composure. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "What you did tonight was incredible." "I feel numb," I admitted, continuing to pack while she helped. "I thought I'd feel vindicated or angry or something, but I just feel empty." "That's the shock," she said, wrapping another piece of china. "The emotions will come later. Right now, we just need to get you out of here." Adrian's messages had shifted again, this time to threats. "You destroyed everything I worked for. The FBI is freezing our accounts because of your little stunt. My lawyers are going to destroy you. You think you won, but this isn't over. Nobody humiliates me like this." I showed them to Emily, who immediately forwarded them to Arthur. Evidence of harassment would be useful if Adrian decided to escalate beyond angry texts. Though given that federal investigators were likely already drawing up charges against him, he had much bigger problems than our divorce. By 2 a.m., we had my belongings loaded into Emily's SUV and a small moving van. The penthouse looked strange with my presence erased from it, like a stage set after the play has closed. I left my keys on the granite counter alongside the wedding ring I had taken off in the elevator. No note, no explanation. The empty space where I had existed would say everything that needed to be said. The drive to the coastal estate in Newport took 6 hours with the traffic. I had inherited the property when my father died, but had never lived there, maintaining it through a management company while playing middle class in New York. As we passed through the gates, motion sensors triggered subtle lighting that illuminated a house I had only visited 3 times since the funeral. 20 rooms of pristine loneliness stretched out before us. The foyer alone was bigger than most apartments, complete with a chandelier that had supposedly belonged to some 19th century railroad tycoon. Emily whistled softly as we carried boxes through rooms that echoed with our footsteps. "This is insane," she said, setting a box down in what would be my master suite. "You own this entire place, and you've been living in that penthouse pretending to be normal." "I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had," I said, the words ringing hollow now. "Look how well that worked out." We found champagne in the wine cellar, vintage bottles worth thousands, and drank it from paper cups we had picked up at a gas station. The contrast felt somehow appropriate, sitting in an estate valued at $40 million, drinking champagne from convenience store cups while my marriage imploded across every media platform in the country. Arthur called at 4 a.m. Federal agents raided Brooks Technologies an hour ago. They're seizing all computers and financial records. They've brought Adrian in for questioning. Lauren Jenkins, too. I sat up straighter in the leather chair in my father's office, the one he had imported from England decades ago. "Your documentation was incredibly thorough. Combined with what they're finding on the hard drives, they have enough for arrest warrants by morning." Additionally, 3 major investors have already filed civil suits against Adrian personally. The prenuptial agreement won't protect him from that. After Arthur hung up, I turned on the television in my father's study. Every financial network was covering the story. Someone had edited clips of the live-streamed confrontation. My voice, clear and damning, as I revealed both my identity and Adrian's betrayal. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Sinclair heiress exposes husband's fraud at company launch." One analyst was already speculating on what this meant for Brooks Technologies. Without the Sinclair funding, which apparently accounted for 70% of their capital, the company is essentially worthless. Couple that with the fraud allegations and federal raid, we're looking at a total collapse by market open. Emily found me there as the sunrise painted the ocean visible through the study windows. She brought coffee this time in actual mugs, and we sat together, watching my old life be dissected by strangers on television. "How are you feeling?" she asked carefully. I considered the question. In 12 hours, I had gone from being Adrian's naive wife to exposing myself as a billionaire heiress who had taken down her husband's company on live television. My phone showed hundreds of messages from numbers I didn't recognize, journalists, probably, or people who suddenly remembered we had been friends in college. "Free," I finally said. And I meant it. The word had barely left my lips when Emily's phone buzzed with a news alert. She held it up, displaying video footage of Adrian being led out of Brooks Technologies in handcuffs, federal agents flanking him on both sides. His face, captured in the harsh morning light, looked hollow and defeated. Nothing like the confident man who had stood at a podium 12 hours earlier promising to revolutionize gene therapy. The footage looped across all the financial networks. Adrian stumbling slightly on the curb, an agent gripping him firmly by the elbow. The careful way they guided his head into the back of the vehicle, protecting him from bumping the doorframe, even as they arrested him for crimes that could mean a decade in federal prison. Behind him, another team escorted Lauren Jenkins. Her perfect composure finally shattered, mascara running down her cheeks as photographers captured every second of her downfall. Arthur called within minutes of the footage airing. The FBI has expanded their investigation. They've found evidence of additional fraud going back 3 years. Apparently, Lauren Jenkins was selling proprietary research to competitors while billing Brooks Tech for consulting fees that never existed. She's facing conspiracy, corporate espionage, and wire fraud charges. I walked over to the study window, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly before me. The Newport estate had views that could make you forget the rest of the world existed, but I couldn't escape the reality of what was happening miles away in New York. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Adrian, 20 from unknown numbers, and 1 from Eleanor, Adrian's mother. I almost answered that one, but then thought better of it. She could wait. The bankruptcy proceedings moved with astonishing speed. By the following Tuesday, less than a week after the launch event, Brooks Technologies filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. The investors who had threatened civil suits had frozen what few assets remained. And without the Sinclair funding that had kept it afloat, the company collapsed like a house of cards. Arthur arranged for Sinclair Pharmaceuticals to bid on the patents and research assets, a formality, really, since no other firm wanted to touch anything associated with the scandal. "We're offering $10 million for the entire patent portfolio," Arthur informed me during a meeting in the estate's formal dining room, papers scattered across a table set for 20. "The research is actually quite valuable if properly managed. The scientists did good work despite leadership's failures. Make sure the research team knows they'll have jobs if they want them," I said, signing the acquisition papers. They didn't create this mess. They shouldn't suffer for Adrian's crimes. The auction itself took place in a sterile conference room in New York. I didn't attend, but Arthur's associate sent updates. Adrian's executive team watched as their life's work was carved up and sold for pennies on the dollar. The legitimate assets went to Sinclair, the office furniture and equipment went to liquidators. The expensive executive floor furnishings, including Adrian's prized awards and diplomas, sold for less than $1,000 total. Eleanor finally tracked me down on the 8th day after I had ignored 6 voicemails that progressed from demanding to desperate. She showed up at the estate gates unannounced, forcing me to decide whether to let her in or leave her standing there like a door-to-door saleswoman. Against my better judgment, I had security escort her to the front entrance. The woman who walked into my father's study looked very little like the Eleanor who had criticized my housekeeping and questioned my worth as her son's wife. Her normally flawless hair hung limp. Her designer clothes looked like she had slept in them, and her eyes held the kind of desperation recognized only by people who have lost everything they thought mattered. "Please," she said before I could speak, sinking into the chair opposite my desk uninvited. "You have to help him. You have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Eleanor. Your son embezzled funds, committed fraud, and destroyed the lives of hundreds of employees who trusted him. He made mistakes," she said, tears flowing freely now, ruining makeup that had probably taken her an hour to apply. "But he doesn't deserve to lose everything. He's my only son, Alara. Surely you can understand a mother's love." I thought about all the dinners where she had unfavorably compared me to Lauren Jenkins. The constant suggestions that Adrian had married beneath him. The subtle, and not so subtle, insults about my supposed middle-class background. But seeing her now, broken and begging, I felt something I didn't expect. Not forgiveness, certainly not that, but a sort of tired pity. "I can't help Adrian," I said firmly. "He created this situation with his own choices. But I can ensure your personal trust fund remains protected from the civil suits, the one your late husband set up. It's modest, but it will keep you comfortable." She sobbed louder. Whether from relief or continued despair, I couldn't tell. After she left, Emily found me standing by the window again, watching the sunset over the water. "That was more generous than she deserved," Emily observed. "She's a bitter, selfish woman who raised a son in her exact image," I replied. "But she doesn't deserve to be homeless just because Adrian turned out to be exactly who she taught him to be." The ultimate satisfaction came 2 weeks later when I personally oversaw the gutting of the Brooks Technologies executive floor. As the new owner through Sinclair Pharmaceuticals, I had total control over the space. Most of it would be converted into research labs, giving the scientists the resources they had always needed but never received under Adrian's leadership. But his office, that corner suite where I had heard him call me naive, where I had watched him with Lauren, that space deserved special treatment. I stood in the doorway as workers dismantled everything that had made it his sanctuary. The massive oak desk where he had planned his exit strategy. The wall of awards and accolades that had fed his ego. The leather couch where he had betrayed our marriage in every possible way. What do you want us to do with this? The foreman held up a framed photo that had been on Adrian's desk, our wedding photo. The one where we both looked deliriously happy, before the lies, the secrets, and the betrayals. Trash, I said without hesitation. It all goes in the dumpster. I watched from the window as the workers hurled the couch over the edge into the industrial dumpster below. It landed with a satisfying crash, leather ripping, frames splintering. 6 years of marriage reduced to garbage in a metal bin, waiting to be hauled away and forgotten. The office would become a supply closet, shelves of printer paper and toner cartridges where Adrian's ego had once lived. Janitors would store mops and buckets where he had kept his secrets and lies. Every time someone needed office supplies, they would walk through the space where Adrian Vance thought he was building an empire, never knowing they were standing on the ruins of a man who confused cruelty with strength and deception with intelligence. As I signed the final renovation orders, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another reporter, but something made me read it. Miss Sinclair. This is Dr. Patricia Kim from the research team. Thank you for saving our jobs and our research. We won't let you down. The research team didn't know it yet, but under Sinclair's leadership, they would complete the gene therapy breakthrough Adrian had promised but never delivered. Their work would save lives, grab headlines for all the right reasons, and prove that good science could survive bad leadership. Adrian would watch it all from a federal prison while his former employees achieved everything he had only pretended to be building. Dr. Patricia Kim's message stayed with me through the months that followed. A small reminder that something good could emerge from the wreckage. 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, corporate restructuring, and learning to inhabit the life I had hidden for so long. The Newport estate no longer felt like a museum I was visiting, it had become a home. Its 20 rooms gradually filled with actual life instead of an echo of emptiness. The invitation to speak at the Global Pharmaceutical Innovation Summit arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered by courier to ensure I couldn't pretend I hadn't received it. They wanted me to give the keynote address, to stand before an audience of industry leaders and explain Sinclair's new direction. The very podium where Adrian had planned to announce Brooks Tech's breakthrough would now be mine. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that morning, but this time I wasn't hiding anything. The Cartier watch gleamed on my wrist. The designer suit I wore cost more than most people's monthly salary, and I no longer pretended otherwise. My reflection showed someone I was still learning to recognize, confident without being arrogant, powerful without being cruel, authentic in a way I had never been allowed to be before. The convention center was buzzing with a familiar energy when I arrived. Many of the exact same faces from that night 6 months ago filled the audience, though their expressions had changed. Where they had once shown polite interest in Adrian's promises, they now looked at me with genuine curiosity and perhaps a touch of wariness. Everyone knew the story of the naive wife who turned out to be a billionaire, taking down her husband's empire while building something better from its ashes. "Good morning," I began, my voice ringing clearly across the room without the tremble that used to accompany my public speaking. 6 months ago, many of you witnessed what happens when ambition operates without ethics, when success is built on deception rather than genuine innovation. Today, I'm here to show you what we've built in its place. The presentation outlined the transformation of Sinclair Pharmaceuticals. Not just the acquisition of the research, but a complete restructuring of how pharmaceutical development could function. Profit sharing for every employee, from the janitors to the lead scientists. Anonymous ethics reporting that actually resulted in action. Open sourcing certain research to advance the field rather than just our bottom line. We've proven that ethical business isn't just morally right, I continued, advancing slides that displayed our latest breakthrough, the gene therapy Adrian had promised but never delivered, now officially in clinical trials. It's also more profitable. Our researchers are more innovative when they aren't operating in fear. Our partnerships are stronger when built on transparency. Our innovations are more meaningful when they are designed to help people rather than just generate revenue. Emily stood by the side of the stage. Now my chief operating officer, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she had made in a year at her old job. She had earned every penny of her new salary, helping me transform Sinclair from my father's traditional pharma company into something revolutionary. When I introduced her, the applause was genuine. Everyone in the industry knew her story, the loyal friend who had stood by my side when everyone else would have run. The one who had helped pack up my grandmother's china while my world collapsed. The one who drank champagne from paper cups in a $40 million mansion while we figured out how to rebuild. The Q&A afterward was probing but respectful. How had I hidden my identity for so long? What made me finally reveal the truth? Did I regret the way it happened? I answered honestly. Admitting that living a double life had been exhausting, that love had made me do foolish things, that sometimes the truth needs a dramatic reveal to be believed. 3 hours later, I was walking to my car when I saw him. Adrian was standing outside the federal courthouse, 2 blocks away, his lawyer by his side. Both wore dark suits that couldn't hide the defeat in their posture. Sentencing had been that morning. I knew, but I had chosen not to attend. Seeing him now was like seeing the ghost of someone who had once mattered but had become entirely irrelevant. He saw me at the exact same moment and froze. He had just been handed 5 years in federal prison. The judge, apparently unmoved by his lawyer's arguments about him being a first-time offender with a previously stellar reputation. He would serve at least 3 before the possibility of parole. His lawyer tried to steer him away, but Adrian pulled free and walked toward me with the determined stride of someone who has nothing left to lose. "Allura," he said when he was close enough that I could see the lines around his eyes, the gray hairs that hadn't been there 6 months ago. I waited, saying nothing, giving him no encouragement or acknowledgement beyond holding his gaze. "I just wanted to say," he paused, seemingly searching for words that might matter, "that you destroyed everything." "No," I replied calmly. "I revealed everything. There's a significant difference. You planned it from the start. Hiding who you were, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate me." I almost laughed at his narcissism, still fully intact despite everything. "You're still trying to play the victim in this story. I hid who I was because I wanted to be loved for me. You hid who you were because you were planning to rob me. We are not the same." He stepped closer, and I saw his lawyer tense up, likely worried about violating some court order. "You were so naive," he said, echoing the words that had started it all. "You actually believed in love." "You were right about one thing," I said, my voice steady as granite. "I was naive. But naivety is cured by experience. What you have is selfishness, cruelty, the total inability to value anything beyond yourself. That is terminal." His face flushed red, but before he could respond, his lawyer grabbed his arm and forcefully led him away. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a vague sense of closure. Adrian would spend the next few years in prison, then come out to find an industry that had moved on entirely without him, where his name was synonymous with scandal instead of success. That night, I sat in my father's study while the sunset painted the ocean in shades of copper and gold. In my hands, I held the letter he had left with the estate documents. One I had read 100 times but only now truly understood. "My dearest Allura," it began in his precise handwriting. "If you are reading this, you have finally claimed your inheritance. Not the money, those are just numbers and accounts, but the responsibility that comes with it. I hid this from you not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to discover who you were without its weight. True wealth is not what you inherit, it is what you become when you are tested. Money can be lost, stolen, or squandered. But the person you become through trial and triumph, that is yours forever. I believe you will become someone remarkable. With all my love, Dad." The letter trembled slightly in my hands as unexpected tears blurred the words. Through the window, the sea stretched endlessly, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the future waited. Not the future I had planned with Adrian, built on lies and hidden identities, but something real, solid, and entirely my own. Tomorrow, the research team would present their latest findings. Next week, we would announce 3 new partnerships with firms that shared our core values. Next month, the first patients would receive the gene therapy that could save their lives. The empire I had inherited had become something far greater than my father had ever imagined. Not just profitable, but purposeful. Some women inherited fortunes and spent them. Others inherited fortunes and hid them. I had done both, and learned that neither brought happiness. True satisfaction came from using that fortune to build something meaningful, surrounded by people who valued loyalty over pedigree and truth over appearances. What was your favorite sweet moment of justice? Let me know in the comments. Don't miss out on heartwarming stories like this.